Hello. So in the previous video, I introduced the idea of David Ricardo's comparative advantage using Ricardo's original example. So in this lesson, we dive in a theory of comparative advantage in a little bit more detail. And to do so, I use this core textbook example where we, instead of two countries, we have now two individuals named Carlos and Greta. So perhaps it's easier to understand it at more individual levels, individual persons. Suppose that Carlos and Greta both have some small farms living in some kind of isolated island, and this picture indicates this production possibility sets of Carlos and Greta. Carlos on the left and Greta on the right. So on this island, they can produce apples and wheat for food. But these two production possibility sets highlighted with this red color or orange color, whatever, indicate that Greta has much more superior production possibilities. So perhaps she's more productive or has better technology. In any case, Greta can produce uh, much more efficiently both wheat and apples. So let's then remember a little bit from introductory economics. So how, in the absence of trade, these Carlos and Greta would then choose how much to produce. So suppose that they maximize utility and they are choosing then the bundle of apples and wheat to maximize their utility. So they might have different preferences on how much apples they want to consume. But then since their labor input is fixed, then or they can choose also how much they want to spend labor to maximize the utility and disutility from the labor. Yeah, in any case, this picture indicates then the indifference curves that describe the preferences, that how much, in what kind of combination these two individuals want to consume apples and wheat. And this then indicates this kind of initial situation in the absence of trade. So if both of them grow their own apples and wheat, and how much they want to initially consume if there's no trade. Okay, so then Carlos chooses the point D in this figure, where this production possibility frontier is tangent to this indifference curves, and similarly then Greta chooses point E, where where we find that this feasible consumption frontier and production frontier is then tangent to the indifference curves. So this is this basic kind of utility maximization subject to this kind of production constraint. So, okay, this is what happens if these two individuals are producing their own food and there's no possibility to trade. But suppose then that these two individuals can start to trade with apples and wheat, how the situation changes. So the following slide then indicates how this kind of consumption possibilities and production possibilities. Now, actually, production possibilities remain exactly the same as before, but consumption possibilities increase. And the purpose of this slide is to explain why. So this is really illustrating this insight of David Ricardo's argument. So first of all, if these two individuals can start trading apples and wheat, then who should produce what? So notice if we now in this slide we have this production possibility frontiers of both individuals indicated in the same diagram. Notice that the gap in the apples production in the favor of Greta is not as large as the gap in wheat production. So if we consider wheat, then with the same labor, Greta could produce 10,000 units, whereas Carlos can only achieve 4,000 units. So only 40% of this Greta's output. But in terms of apples, the gap is not so large. So Carlos can produce 10,000 apples, and Greta can produce 12,500 apples. So in this sense, we say that Carlos has comparative advantage in the production of apples. This is because even though Greta has absolute advantage in both apples and wheat, Carlos is relatively less inefficient in apples compared to wheat. So therefore, it makes sense because Carlos has this kind of comparative advantage. It makes sense that Carlos produces apples. So Carlos can specialize in producing apples where he's not as bad as in the production of wheat. And it makes sense that Greta then specializes in wheat production where she's far superior compared to Carlos. And then, so these solid red lines indicate that what the production possibilities, but then we have also this broken straight lines that start from these specialized production points. So when these two individuals specialize and then trade, then suppose that these broken lines indicate that what kind of relative prices they are using for trading, then both individuals can have a better outcome than they would be without trading. So in this example, then if we also combine these indifference curves, then Carlos would choose point B and Greta point A, and in this sense, notice that if we consider wheat, then Greta would produce 10,000 units of wheat, of which 8,000 units she will consume herself, and 2,000 units will sell to Carlos. And if we consider apples, then Carlos produces 10,000 units of apples, of which 6,000 units he consumes himself, and 4,000 units he sells to Greta in exchange for the wheat. Okay, so these numbers need to add up, but any point on this these broken lines are possible. It depends on the preferences of these individuals, and of course, these numbers need to add up. So this indicates that these broken lines are above these solid lines, both for Carlos and Greta, and in that sense, both individuals can benefit from trade. So finally, I want to note that perhaps it's good that this example is given instead of countries, but we have it in case of two individuals. So the same idea can of course work also in the households. So suppose that these two individual farmers, Carlos and Greta, get together and start a family. So then in a family they could also similarly specialize. And it doesn't have to be some kind of agricultural farm. It could be also any kind of household with household works like cleaning or doing laundry or shopping and so on. So in this kind of situations, also there is possibility to that with this kind of specialization, that family members specialize in tasks where they have comparative advantage, and then exchange, it can also benefit them compared to this situation that they live separately. Okay, so to summarize the lesson from the comparative advantage, let me first give an empirical example of how this can be also in the level of countries and how it can also show up. So this is from the Krugman et al. Textbook, a little bit a dated example from 1995, but those of you who can remember, during that time, Germany was considered as a very advanced industrial economy, and China was only had started its industrialization, but did not, for example, produce such kind of high quality premium cars like Germany. So in this example, um, uh, we consider that what is in the first column here is Chinese output per worker as percentage of Germany. So in 1995, for all manufacturing goods, the Chinese output was only 5% of that of Germany. So Germany had far superior productivity in manufacturing goods. However, if we think about apparel, so clothes in this, like in this previous example, in clothes production, Chinese output per worker was almost 20% of Germany. 20% is still very low, but much higher than 5% compared to the other manufacturing. So in that sense, Germany had an absolute advantage compared to China in 1995 in all manufacturing, including also clothes. However, then if we consider the right column where we have total Chinese output as percentage of Germany, so in all manufacturing, China's output was only 71.6% in 1995, but in clothes it was 802%. So 8 times more than Germany. So this example illustrates that China, even though it was less productive in all manufacturing compared to Germany, including clothes, China had a comparative advantage in clothes production. And not surprising, we see also that China's output of clothes used to be also then much higher in compared to Germany in clothes production. So we can find this kind of examples in many industries. So there is a lot of examples that can support the theory of comparative advantage. Of course, there's also examples that do not really match, and we will then further refine the theory later. And of course, since 1995, China has, of course, also improved its efficiency and productivity. So nowadays, also, for example, China is exporting electric cars, perhaps more than Germany does. So let me summarize the main lesson of the theory of comparative advantage and for international trade particularly. So trade between two countries can benefit both countries if each country exports the goods in which it has a comparative advantage. So both countries can benefit, and countries tend to specialize in those goods where they have a comparative advantage. They don't necessarily need to have an absolute advantage in any good, but every country in principle has a comparative advantage in some good. It's also then good to emphasize this is a statement about possibilities, but it is not a prediction what will actually happen. Okay? So in the real world, of course, there's no central authority that would decide that which country produces wine or clothes or apples or wheat. And there's no any international authority that would actually distribute them these products. So this trade is, of course, taking place in the marketplace, and they have supply and demand. And there's, of course, also the consumer preferences matter, and bargaining power would matter. So by bargaining power, let me come still back to this figure. So we don't really know how the slope of these broken lines is determined. We know that, of course, that the trade to be beneficial, then the slope should be such that it's somewhere between the slopes of these solid lines. But how exactly, then it depends on that how much if we have these two individuals, so how much Carlos wants wheat in exchange for apples versus how much Greta wants apples for her wheat. So this depends on the bargaining power and how they can argue for their case. But there's not any specific theory that would say that how the slope is actually determined, nor there is any kind of international authority that can say that, okay, this is the right price that you need to follow to sell. Okay. So in the next lesson, then I will discuss some common myths about the comparative advantage. See you then. Bye.